Welcome back, Realtors. Top of the morning to you. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and welcome to this special Clover and Compliance edition of the SCR Update Podcast. While we're all looking for that pot of gold, we're starting today with the news and regulatory updates that you need to protect your green and serve your clients. This is episode number 386. Today is March the 17th, 2026. And as always, I'm your who writes this, Mike? I'm your lucky leprechaun, Nick Kremydas, CEO, South Carolina Realtors. Grab your coffee and let's jump into what you need to know for this week. Today, we're going to be breaking down the essential advocacy, ethics, and even talk a little bit about some FinCEN gold that you need to succeed without having to rely on a rainbow. Well, Mike, it's been a minute since we've gotten together. We've had intervening Capitol Conference, our Realtor legislative meetings that have kept us off of our regular schedule. Hopefully, those will be all of my Irish-related or St. Patty Day-related themes here. But let's jump right in. Lots of news to cover from the last couple of weeks. We're going to start in Washington on the legislative front in Congress. The Senate passed the 21st Century Road to Housing Act last week. This is the top story. It's a major federal move. This act represents a rare moment of overwhelming bipartisan consensus in Washington, in the U.S. Senate. It was co-authored by South Carolina's own Republican Senator Tim Scott and Democrat Senator Elizabeth Warren. It's passed the Senate by an 89-10 vote. That just doesn't happen very much these days. This legislation is designed to modernize how our country approaches housing availability and affordability. So, a real quick overview of what it does. It focuses on ROAD. ROAD stands for Regulation, Opportunity, Affordability, and Delivery. It aims to streamline federal housing programs and encourage local governments to reduce the regulatory red tape that often stalls new development. Now, while we care about this in South Carolina, we are battling infrastructure, concurrency hurdles here in our state. And this federal support for opportunity and delivery is a breath of fresh air for our inventory-starved markets. The ROAD Act is the most significant federal housing reform to move through Congress in decades. The Senate's original, it combines elements of the Senate's original Road to Housing Act and the House, what they call the 21st Century Housing Act. The four pillars of the act are very much built on a supply side, let me repeat that, a supply side philosophy, focusing on making it easier and cheaper to build rather than just adding new subsidies. We don't have a demand side problem that much in housing. We have a lot of demand. We don't need to incentivize that demand, but we need more product. So this legislation cuts red tape. It streamlines the National Environmental Policy Act, their reviews for small-scale infill housing projects that can prevent years of delay just for simple developments. It modernizes the definition of manufactured housing to include modular and prefab homes, which are often faster and cheaper and oftentimes better built than traditional site-built homes. It also incentivizes local governments to reform zoning laws by tying federal grant money to actual housing production. The bill aims to be budget neutral by repurposing and modernizing existing federal housing programs. So for realtors, here are the key provisions. Number one, let me back up a little bit here, Mike, for a second before I jump into this next section. So this legislation has been passed by the House, passed by the Senate, still needs to go to the House. Now, there are some elements in this bill that are going to create, I think, some need for negotiation in the House. And the first one is that the bill contains an institutional investor ban. It prohibits large investors, these are these entities that own more than 350 homes, from buying additional single-family homes. The bill is aimed at homes for people, not corporations, is kind of the tagline we've heard many times over the last few weeks. It requires large investors in the build-to-rent projects to sell those homes to individual buyers within 7 years. Now, there are some caveats and other conditions there, but it forces those large institutional investors to eventually sell that product back into the marketplace. And for the first time, community development block grants can be used for new housing construction, not just repairs. This increases the cap. There's a public welfare cap as well that I need to mention real quick. The bill increases the cap on bank investments in community development from 15 to 20%, unlocking potentially billions of private capital for housing credit. And lastly, the bill permanently excludes veterans' disability payments from income calculations when determining eligibility for housing assistance, helping our men and women who have served our great country. So, as I mentioned, what's next? The House has to take this up. The Senate's passed it. The House is currently debating the investor ban, which may not receive a warm welcome in the House. Some representatives want to ensure that build-to-rent communities are fully exempt so that construction isn't actually discouraged by the legislation. In addition to the news out of Congress, the President signed 2 new executive orders in the last week that go straight to the heart of housing affordability. Now I'll give you a quick summary of how these 2 executive orders are going to impact South Carolina's real estate ecosystem. Number one, it's going to impact South Carolina home builders. The executive order, by removing regulatory barriers, is heavily focused on reducing the timeline and cost of land development, which we know is a major pain point in South Carolina. The order specifically directs the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers to reconsider strict permitting codes regarding stormwater and wetlands under the Clean Water Act. For South Carolina builders, especially those operating in the low country and coastal regions, this could significantly cut red tape, time delays, and expenses associated with developing land that feature natural water features. The federal government, also in these executive orders, will begin incentivizing state and local municipalities to speed up their permitting timelines and roll back burdensome rules that create burdens, whether it's building codes or excessive design mandates. And also, the administration has taken the opportunity to push and align opportunity zone tax incentives with single-family home development. This could spur a wave of new residential construction in designated revitalization areas across the state. And let's not forget to mention the impact that this could have on local community banks. The provision in the order that promotes access to mortgage credit aims to empower local and smaller scale lenders by removing some of the heavy federal compliance costs that have kept them constrained since 2008. By directing the CFPB to update its mortgage lending guidance, smaller banks will face fewer reporting hurdles. This means your local credit unions and community banks can approve and service loans much faster and potentially at lower costs to the consumer. So this aligns perfectly with the Roads Act that I mentioned, sponsored by Senator Scott. And he recently highlighted that reducing these heavy federal regulations will directly empower community banks in places like Anderson, Spartanburg, and Bamberg to fund more first-time homebuyer mortgages and small business loans without being choked by Washington red tape. So let's change topics, Mike, and focus a little bit more on the real estate profession. And let's look at what's happening in a recent shift in the landscape. I know all of you have been reading about what's happening in the marketplace. 2 weeks ago, we saw a big announcement, an alliance between Compass and Redfin. Compass is now syndicating. It's coming soon in private exclusive listings directly to Redfin. This gives these listings a lot of exposure without starting the days on market clock in the MLS. And not to be outdone, other companies like Howard Hanna have announced their own programs. Again, it's another business approach to where their agents and clients get a first look at internal listings before they hit the broader market. Now, these moves could be seen as a direct challenge to NAR's clear cooperation policy. For local MLSs, this may be a concern when it comes to issues of market transparency. If the quote-unquote best houses are being sold in private loops, does the MLS still have the necessary data and information to provide accurate appraisals and accurate data on those sales? In breaking news just this morning, Zillow announced that they were bringing pre-market listings out in a big partnership that they announced today. These brokerages can now display listings on Zillow and Trulia before they hit the MLS. Zillow argues that private listings aren't good for consumers, and they're positioning this as a way to provide more exposure to these listings. And this isn't just a pilot test program. Zillow has partnered in the announcement today. They announced that they're participating with KW, RE/MAX, Home Services, and others. And I think the carrot that they're offering for listing agents is that they're offering, if that connection is made during this preview phase, leads generated that are leads that lead to a close through Zillow's network. The listing agent is the one who's directly contacted. So to that end, again, this creates, I don't know if it's a turning point, but it's definitely a line in the sand that these various companies, Zillow, Compass, and others have drawn in this space. And we'll see how MLSs, how the profession, how other companies, how all that reacts. But you need to know what's happening in the marketplace so that you can be prepared when you get these kinds of questions from your clients. So let's change gears one more time and let's talk again. A quick reminder, we are now about 2 weeks into the new FinCEN rules, which officially became in play on March 1st. Again, as a reminder, if your clients are involved in non-finance transfers to legal entities, a report must be filed. Even if there's no money being transferred at all, the property is just being moved from a owner name to an LLC name. That requires a closing. That's a reportable event. Make sure your clients' closing attorneys are on top of the paperwork. We've added clauses in our new agreements to provide warnings and disclosures and disclaimers to your clients, and be the professional that helps them avoid the landmine and avoid any delays. If you're dealing with an entity buyer, cash deal, residential real estate, warn the closing attorney ahead of time and avoid those delays. So, Mike, I think it's time for our Don't Do That segment. Thanks, Mike, and welcome to the Don't Do That segment, where we highlight the common mistakes, ethical slip-ups, and risky business practices you need to avoid. From compliance headaches to client horror stories, we're here to help keep you out of hot water. So let's dive right in. This week, we're looking at a brand new guidance document from the South Carolina Real Estate Commission regarding limited service or a la carte brokerages. Mike, if you could put into the link a link to the PDF from the website. So here's the scenario. You're a listing agent offering a limited service model. You've got a contract that says you'll put the house on the MLS, but the seller handles all the rest. An offer comes in and you tell the buyer's agent, I'm just the MLS entry guy. You need to talk to the seller directly to negotiate terms and write up the counter offer. Just send me a copy of the final version for my files. The Real Estate Commission says, don't do that. And here's why. Statutory duties are non-waivable. Even if your private contract says you won't participate in negotiations, South Carolina real estate license law says you must. You are legally required to present all written offers and counteroffers in a timely manner. This is not a duty you can contract away. You cannot delegate your statutory duties to the buyer's agent. When you tell a buyer's agent to write up the seller's counter, you're forcing them to interfere with your client relationship and potentially engage in unauthorized representation. So, by stepping out of the loop, you risk having your client inadvertently disclose sensitive info, like their bottom line price or motivation, directly to the buyer's agent. That's a massive failure of your duty of confidentiality. So the lesson for buyer's agents, if you run into a limited service listing agent who tries to opt out of the deal, don't draft or negotiate terms on behalf of the seller. Those terms must come from the listing agent or the seller directly. Confirm in writing exactly who is authorized to receive and present offers. Notify your broker in charge if the listing agent's lack of participation is creating a conflict with the representation of your client, and do consider filing a complaint with the Real Estate Commission. In this market, we're all looking for that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but as realtors, we know that the real treasure isn't found with luck. It's found through advocacy and ethics. Why are realtors like four-leaf clovers? Because they are hard to find and lucky to have. But seriously, don't rely on a leprechaun to manage your listings. If you're practicing, Mike, I can't believe, who wrote this? If you're practicing limited service brokerage and aren't showing up for your negotiations, you aren't wearing green. You're going to be seeing red from the commission. So let's make sure we're protecting our clients, and let's make sure we're protecting our clients' Clover by actually fulfilling our statutory duties. So the bottom line is this: a limited service agreement can reduce the scope of your marketing, but it can never eliminate your legal duties. If you're the listing agent of record, stay in the game or stay out of the business. Real Estate Commission says, don't do that. All right, Mike, so let's wrap this up. We've got
Sorry, did I distract you?
oh, no, we've got some guests that just walked into the studio. So let's wrap this up, Mike, with an Irish wish for our members. May your coffee be strong, your escrow be short. I'm not even sure what that means. And may your closings be uneventful. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. We'll see you next week for the SCR Update. Thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay realtor strong, and we'll see you soon. Take care.